Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
I'm Anika.
I'm Priya.
And today we have some fun stories lined up for you guys. First, we're going to do the Robinhood and Kalshi partnership. Recently, they partnered so that they can offer events contracts to the Robinhood users. And we're also going to talk about Stargate, which is a $500 billion initiative to fund data centers for AI.
But before we get into those two stories, it's Super Bowl Sunday.
Go Chiefs.
We're hosting.
Oh.
Okay, I'm a Taylor Swift fan at heart.
But have you seen that Taylor Swift has always been an Eagles fan? Like, she literally references it in her song lyrics.
Yeah, but it's Travis, you know?
No, I understand, but like, that's her home team.
Priya just out-Taylored you. Never get into a Taylor convo with Priya.
I wasn't aware of this knowledge.
We have to talk about the Super Bowl ads. I feel like a lot of companies have aired their ads already, which is interesting.
Did you see Alex Earl's Carl Jr. ad and
Yeah.
the upset over that?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, no, it's
I know,
fun.
I see both sides.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, okay, I guess for context, she did a raunchy ad for a burger company, and it just looks more like old-timey ads, which
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with, but it
Well,
just
it's
looks
also their
over-sexualized.
thing. They've done it with every big supermodel, and Carl's Jr. specifically has built this brand for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's when all ads in a society look like that, which was more true 30 years ago or something, then it's not okay. Because I think that's the problem. But if there's one company that wants that, it's for example, I don't care about the Victoria's Secret runway show because that's their thing. But if every girl in a magazine looked like a Victoria's Secret supermodel, I would say we have a problem as a society.
I agree with you, but I think more companies get away with it. If Carl Jr. did that ad while other people were doing their versions of their ads, right? Then no one says anything. And I think it's because the times have changed and they're bringing back an old trend and people are not happy about it.
No, yeah, and I agree that I guess it's hard to know where the line is because it's if she wants to do it and they want to do it, who is the public to be upset about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a good ad. She looks great.
She looks so good.
Yeah.
Also, it's Carl's Jr.
Oh.
Both of you keep saying Carl Jr.
Carl's.
Well, I'm
Honestly,
never heard of them.
Oh,
What? Have you never seen their ad?
No,
No, I've never seen this.
It's probably because you don't watch the Super Bowl.
I've seen it.
Okay, slander. That is the one game a year that I do. I've always watched the Super Bowl. I was asleep for a few in college, but that's because I had a rough night the night prior. Okay, so Perplexity is not doing a Super Bowl ad this year.
Wait, I literally was gonna bring this up just now.
They're giving $1 million to one person, and
Yeah.
the way that you enter is by asking Perplexity 5 questions during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Arvin posted about it, and it's just instead of doing the ad, they do what Anika just said, and so they can still drive users. But it's if you hear about it, that's the only difference. Is I feel it's not going to drive as much attention to Perplexity because you have to know that Perplexity is doing this.
I feel like it will because I think that it creates even more organic on social media and word of mouth interactions because it's I'm way more likely to talk to my friends about that ad to be you should ask 5 questions during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I feel we're all going to do it. Our whole friend
Oh,
group's
I'm making a
obviously gonna
TikTok
do-
about
yeah,
it.
Yeah. For the average ad in the Super Bowl, besides the 30 seconds it's on the screen, we're never going to talk about it again.
I disagree. I do think you do talk about pretty iconic ads in the Super Bowl for a week later because there'll be memes about it. I think with the Perplexity one, it's just I actually do think it would have been more beneficial if they just did an ad because the average American isn't on X and learning about AI forward companies. It's when we're in a park and we're asking people questions and it's what's ChatGPT? People don't know.
Yeah, that is insane.
Yeah, that's interesting. I see your point. I actually still think it's a creative marketing strategy just because they're the only ones to do it. But I think that my prediction is that marketing strategy is going to very quickly become way more popular and then maybe eventually oversaturated because recently one of my friends mentioned that Function, which is a healthcare company.
Yeah.
I think they do blood tests and stuff. In their referral program, they basically say we would rather give you money than Instagram or Facebook. So if you refer your friend 60 days after they start their membership, we will give you $100 direct deposit. And
It's basically just giving money back to the consumer as opposed to spending money on ads, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, the Super Bowl, whatever it is.
Okay, the one thing I also wanted to bring up was the fact that there are more tech companies doing Super Bowl ads now. I feel growing up, I always saw burger ads or beer ads and I didn't care as much. Or maybe a Doritos ad. The Doritos ads were always cool.
I agree that it was really popular to have consumer ads and now there's more tech ads. And I think that the tech space in general has a B2C trend right now, where there's a lot of really hot companies like Perplexity or even OpenAI, which obviously has a lot of B2B revenue, but it's really thought of more as a B2C company where you think about everyone going in ChatGPT.
Dude, B2C is back. for a long time, the tech world and the VC world in general was like all in on B2B SaaS. Like that's the hottest thing. But with the rise of AI and the need for AI applications, like I think B2C is like coming in strong again.
I feel like Coinbase was the first one
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
remember.
They did the QR code thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I also think there's B2B companies that now do B2C marketing, which we talked about in our ramp episode, and now
Yeah.
they're running a Super Bowl ad, which is creative as well.
But I would honestly say Ramp is like a B2C company because like they're targeting the small business owners,
But that is still B2B.
I guess.
But I get what you're like every B2B thing is like targeting
A
like
person.
one to three people to buy the product.
I think like the reason why Ramp can run an ad is because their customers are the small business owners. But I don't think like it would work for any B2B company.
Well,
I don't think their average customer is like a mom and pop shop. It's probably like a small tech company.
Yeah,
No.
I agree. I just think they want to be hype. Like, I don't think it's like necessarily a specific strategy other than like them wanting to be a hype company.
I think that's the channel that they have to grow in. Like they do have a stronghold on the startup scene in general. For example, when we talked about like unbundling, now you don't need $25,000 to spend, which honestly, $25,000 to spend over a year for like a restaurant is like not that big of a deal.
For like
Food
any
costs.
company, it's like nothing.
It's nothing,
Yeah.
right? So like I do think there's the whole restaurant industry, there's small mom and pop shops, like car washes or whatever. They haven't gotten, and that's what they're trying to reach for.
Well, if you want to learn more, tune into our ramp episode.
Moving on to one of our main topics of conversation, the Robinhood and Kalshi partnership. If you don't know, Kalshi is an events contract platform. So basically an events contract is that you can bet on a future outcome of an event. So for example, I think the Chiefs are going to win. I'm going to bet on that.
And if you're curious, you can listen to our Kalshi episode to learn more.
Yeah, and we go really deep into the tech.
I love our Kalshi episode. I think it's one of our best episodes ever.
I agree. I do think it's
It was a
worth
really
listen.
fun episode.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I was in a mood that day. So Robinhood is going to be a broker for the Kalshi exchange, meaning you can buy futures contracts in the Robinhood app, and then they place that order on the Kalshi exchange. So they rolled this partnership out on February 3rd, and then on February 4th, they rolled it back because of the CFTC saying they do not want Robinhood to offer the Super Bowl events contract. And so this was a pretty quick turnaround, which is crazy. There was a lot of news around it, but Anika, I'm curious to get your take on why the CFTC would just like walk back their decision so fast.
So the CFTC is the regulatory body that regulates future derivatives trading, and they make sure that no one's trading on things that are contrary to public interest, which includes like gaming or terrorism or an assassination. Obviously, you don't want to start having legal betting markets on if someone's going to get assassinated in the next 6 months, because that clearly creates perverse incentives. And then there's all these gray area things like, oh, are perverse incentives created when you start betting on sports? And that's like a whole back and forth debate. But to answer your question, Maya, I think they did this because it seems like the CFTC, Kalshi, and Robinhood have all been in continuous conversations, but the CFTC hasn't given true regulatory clarity. And I would liken this to our Coinbase episode where we talk about the SEC not giving true regulatory clarity to crypto. And I think it's similar where like they're playing this game of chicken. They'll have a small product release, see how the CFTC responds, and then kind of play by ear. So Robinhood rolled it out to 1% of customers. And I think the fact that they rolled it out to 1% instead of a larger amount, part of it is like
To see
bugs
yeah.
and stuff, but part of it is just like a regulatory, like poking the bear.
This is actually really fascinating to me because I never realized how arbitrary these gray areas really are and how companies and the CFTC really interact. I think growing up, I just assumed that like laws were clear and then you just did stuff based on laws. Like it's a very naive take.
Not growing up, like literally like a year ago
No, I
before
know.
this podcast.
And I think the CFTC does the most to make their filings like the most confusing they could possibly be. Because in this scenario, I was like, okay, so Robinhood's no longer offering this through their platform, but it still is available on Kalshi.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that was my biggest open question.
Yeah, so you can still bet on the Super Bowl on Kalshi, and you can actually bet across 4 different questions, like yes, who is going to win, but also like the weather in New Orleans, what songs Kendrick's going to do, what companies will even run ads. And so it is interesting. I also think the CFTC will never come out and say this, but I think that because Robinhood is so mainstream, they're choosing to be harsher on Robinhood than on Kalshi, even though technically the law should be applied equally.
Yeah, I agree. So on January 23rd, that was when Kalshi announced that they can get into like sports-based options contracts. So that's not only the NFL, but also like the NBA, the NHL, like all the other sports leagues as well. And so that was when they submitted the filing to the CFTC, and they still haven't gotten explicit approval.
So the language around the CFTC asking Robinhood to not offer it was also vague, right? Like no article says like the CFTC forced Robinhood to take this down. It's like the CFTC,
it says ask them to not permit customers to access sports events contracts. That's exactly what they said.
Okay, my take is that they weren't aware that they were going to do the Super Bowl contracts like so fast. I
disagree. There's no way Robinhood didn't tell them. Unless they're lying, Robinhood literally publicly has said we told them every single step of the way.
Yeah, their general counsel came out and said that.
They said our intent and plans to offer this product, but they said product in terms of like events contracts in general. Like I think they've been in contact with the CFTC around their events contract product, but maybe potentially not the specific event contract.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think that's true. Like I'm sure.
Do you think the CFTC chair just woke up one day and had a change of heart and was like, actually, I'm not ready, like roll this back?
So I would be really fascinated to sit in these conversations. Yeah. I feel like part of it is I genuinely don't understand how they work.
Yeah.
Because like, it just seems like they're not aligned. Like, you know when the number one thing of going into a meeting is like, let's align. Everyone's always saying like align. Yeah. Like I imagine Robinhood tells the CFTC like, this is our plan. And then the CFTC is like, okay, we have like XYZ concern. And then Robinhood's like, okay, well, we have XYZ remedy. And then the CFTC is like, okay, well, we still have like certain concerns around A, B, C. And then Robinhood basically just like launches it and is like, whatever. Because for example, like, this isn't just a Robinhood CFTC thing.
Okay, I have a crazy conspiracy theory, and it might be totally unfounded. I think someone from like DraftKings or one of the top sports betting app got pissed off and like did some lobbying in the back end and told like the CFTC chair, like, you can't let this happen, because they've been trying to get sports betting legalized in all 50 states. And then to have Robinhood be like one of the mainstream platforms to have a legalized version of sports betting for all 50 states is like unfair.
They're also super against Kalshi existing as a platform.
I have like a more probable conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Anika's like, that's nice, but
no. Like it's like the thing of something like that is like it's totally possible. Like all the logic adds up. It's just like we have no evidence.
Yeah.
So basically like the CFTC is relatively controlled by the president. And so when the presidency changed after the inauguration, there's a new acting chairman, Carolyn Pham.
Yeah.
That like is timed with the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And it's possible she just like came to power, and she has made statements that are like the last CFTC was super confusing. And it's possible she just wants to like take a beat. I mean, this is like the most optimistic case, but like she wants to have a cohesive policy towards events contracts, because it is a slippery slope. Robinhood is a super legit company compared to Kalshi, which almost no one has heard of.
Yeah.
Until recently.
Yeah.
So like you just create this whole slippery slope where like core precedent, public perception precedent, all of this starts getting set that this is like a thing.
A normal thing to do.
But what I don't understand though is then why roll it back a day after it's announced? Like if she comes into power, which she has been before February 3rd, you tell Robinhood we're not going to allow this and don't announce it for the Super Bowl.
No, I think that the CFTC can't tell Robinhood explicitly we're not allowing this because they haven't come to their own ruling and they're so disorganized. And I think Robinhood is doing it anyways because they do
force their hand.
I also think they're not allowed to shut them down until after they launch the actual product, because like you can't preemptively go in and do it, because I think I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a cease and desist or something like that, which you can only do after the product is launched.
That actually makes sense, because then it's like, even if they think that there's an 80% chance there's going to be a cease and desist, Robinhood's still going to launch it to drive like the buzz towards them doing events contracts.
Yeah, like if Robinhood hadn't released the product, there would be 0 articles about it. If it was just like behind closed doors that the CFTC said no.
Yeah.
But now Robinhood's come out and kind of made the CFTC look bad, right?
Well, isn't Trump's CFTC expected to be more lenient than Biden's CFTC on things like events contracts?
I think the one thing with the Trump presidency is we've had a Trump presidency before.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to figure out like what's his CFTC going to do, you can like look at the CFTC that he had before.
Yeah.
And Biden's CFTC tried 12 times more crypto related cases than Trump's, which totally makes sense. And I think crypto and prediction markets have a lot of parallels. Like they're both trying to democratize finance. They both have similar risks around like, is this going to be safe for the average financial consumer?
I also think the CFTC has so much on its plate right now in comparison to like anything it's had before, because like the amount of crypto regulation and events contract regulation that's trying to go through right now is just unlike anything they've seen in the past.
It's also the change of the presidency. That's just gonna like have them redo everything.
Kalshi has been at this since 2018. They're probably so annoyed. And it's worth noting that Carolyn Pham has come out and said there's going to be a roundtable discussion in 45 days to get clarity around this.
I mean, honestly, the same goes for crypto, though.
Something I didn't know was you can actually watch the roundtable. I don't know if that's a crazy, like,
I didn't know that.
dumb. Yeah. You can actually watch these
Isn't
roundtables.
everything on like CCTV?
Yeah.
God, now we're gonna have to tune into this for the pod just to give you guys the inside scoop. I don't want to watch this.
So isn't Trump's son like on Kalshi's board or something?
Oh yeah. What's his name? Trump something.
Don Jr. Well,
The Don.
They needed Mr. President's son to get in on the conversation.
He was once called not the sharpest knife in the drawer by Trump,
Aw.
but
He's not like Barron, who's literally the golden child.
Well, even Ivanka, he said he wanted to sleep with her. Like, he likes a lot of his other... He did.
No, he did.
Wait, Trump has said he would sleep with Ivanka if she wasn't his daughter.
Yeah,
In a public interview.
I feel like I remember this, but I feel like I blacked it out, and now I feel like...
But Kalshi did come out and say this wasn't a political decision. They just know
No,
that.
of course not.
They said they just
not.
know that Don Jr. is a great voice on emerging tech. That's what they said. But then I also want to talk about, did you guys see Tariq's challenge for Kalshi's intern?
Oh, yes, I did.
No, wait, what was it?
You know how Elon's obsessed with like 69 and 420 and being a child?
Yeah.
So basically Tariq was like told their social media intern at Kalshi, I'll pay you $6,900 if you get Elon to follow the account.
And guess what?
Elon followed the account.
Really?
So his intern is getting a fat bonus.
Damn.
Like, that's a lot for an intern.
Yeah, for an intern, yeah.
And then now that Elon follows Kalshi, Tariq on LinkedIn and stuff has been going on these kind of interesting rants saying that there's certain philosophers, like for example Robin Hanson, that say that one of the best ways to approach government is by using events contracts, and like that's how politicians should make their decision because that's like the will of the people.
Wait, so it's like the same polling argument that was there in the event in the election.
Yeah, exactly. But like, so now that Elon follows Tariq is like, this is what we were talking about the whole time.
Oh, okay.
Like,
And there's more
Elon-
visibility.
Yeah, like Elon, like there's a whole entire tracker on Kalshi just for Doge, and Elon can go see like what people think. Like, should Doge do this? Should Doge do that?
And so now you can like influence what Doge
Elon,
does and
in
what
theory.
Elon does through betting on Kalshi's markets. That's crazy.
Yeah, and this all leads me to my pod prediction related to the CFTC's regulation of Kalshi, where I think that it's going to be similar to TikTok, where maybe the regulatory bodies will want to regulate it, both Republicans and Democrats,
Yeah.
because like Carolyn Pham doesn't seem like super pro events contracts to me, but I think Trump is going to be like, and as of today, Kalshi's back. So, you know, I did a little Kalshi thing. I went on Kalshi, and Republicans have never won the polls. They say we're going to lose them. We win a lot of votes, but we never win the polls.
Is this your Trump skit right now of what he's gonna do?
We won the Kalshi polls by 36 points. So I like Kalshi. I like it. I had a slightly good experience. Kamala.
You're not doing like the hand signal, the hand gestures.
Kamala. I don't know if you saw her on the
Marmalade.
Kalshi graph. It was a very big spread. She was here. I was here. There's something else that's very big too. The Kalshi people, they're good people. You might know my son Don Jr. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's more of a spoon, but he's on the board and he tells me very good things. So that's what I think Trump's announcement would be.
Oh my God.
You did not just do that.
Save Kalshi. Like that's what I really think he will.
Oh my
I'm
God.
dying.
It was just a literal copy of what he said about TikTok. Like, that's exactly what he said about TikTok. And I could just see it playing out here. But not to get too much into the regulatory stuff, should we go into the different options with this Kalshi Robinhood partnership?
So I think based on the partnership that they announced, there's pros and cons for both Robinhood and Kalshi in this scenario. And after doing some research, we laid out 3 different hypotheses for different paths that we think they can go down. So the first one is just sticking with the status quo and having this partnership where Robinhood remains the broker and Kalshi remains the exchange. The second is more of a build conversation for Robinhood and if they want to build out their own events contracts market. And then the third is a buy conversation of Robinhood potentially acquiring Kalshi in the future.
We believe in these three outcomes being possible, but I think we disagreed on the likelihood. And so first we're going to start off with explaining why it's even beneficial for Robinhood and Kalshi to partner in the first place.
Yeah, so I guess to back up to what each of their roles is today, Kalshi is acting as the exchange and Robinhood as the broker, which is the exact same way that Robinhood operates with like the stock market. So right now, NASDAQ is the exchange, or Dow Jones or any of the other ones, and Robinhood is the brokerage like Fidelity or Charles Schwab that offers those actually being traded on their platform.
On Kalshi's end during the election, they were functioning both as the broker and as the exchange. So this marks a change for them where they're now giving up the broker position to Robinhood.
What I find really interesting is this partnership signifies that Kalshi is really indexing on building out scalability of their exchange platform and also building out the number of users that use their exchange platform.
I would say like specifically on the end of Robinhood and Kalshi partnering with each other, there's like the huge question of user cannibalization because they do target a very similar user base. And most people that have Kalshi on their phone today, which is 2 million people, probably also have, like I'd say about 75% of those 2 million, 1.5 million have Robinhood on their phone too, and might be more inclined to use Robinhood now.
Yeah, and this cannibalization is not on their exchange product because they're still getting the trades at the end of the day, but this cannibalization is actually on their broker product. So I feel like Kalshi wanting to work with brokers, which they said on January 31st, and the CFTC has allowed it, has signified that like they're not trying to be the broker. And I wonder if this was always like a long-term strategy or if this was a strategy that they had to shift to, but it seems like their revenue is not growing based on the estimates. And there's estimates that they were making 7 to 10 million ARR before the election and then 30 million ARR after the election. And at their current valuation of like, what is it, like 780 in the round they raised in 2022 and with the fintech multiples, like there's just no way that investors will want to invest in this business.
I also don't think that they probably could have gotten approval to only be an exchange and like gotten their product out there without being the brokerage. And so I think they like needed to do that to get events contracts like out into the market, because clearly we saw the CFTC like shutting Robinhood down when it comes to these contracts. And I think that if Kalshi had gone directly that route, they probably would have gotten shut down way earlier.
I actually think in the end, this is going to be hugely beneficial to Kalshi, even after accounting for cannibalization, because Robinhood has 25 million active users that Kalshi's now exposed to. And Kalshi still offers a much more developed product for events contracts than Robinhood. Like you can bet on the weather in New Orleans today, you can bet on the songs Kendrick's gonna play, and like you can't bet on any of those things in Robinhood. So I'm sure they're making a bet, no pun intended, that this like one bet that someone makes on Robinhood hooks them into using the Kalshi app long term.
My perception is that before Robinhood and Kalshi partnered, they obviously talked about a partnership. And I think that before the election even happened, they were talking about a partnership, and Kalshi decided to not do it or not want to work with brokers because they like thought that they could make a lot of money off of the election and then having people just like use the app in general. And I think that they've realized that that doesn't work. Like people will use the app for the election and then not place any more trades after. And so like that drop off is significant.
Like all of us.
Yeah. And so if you apply...
I'm never opening that app.
Exactly. So like if you apply that same theory, let's say you place one trade on Robinhood and then you're like, oh, I want to place more trades, so then I'm going to open up Kalshi. The same argument applies there, that the hook isn't strong enough. And so it's less about them realizing that they're using Robinhood as a CAC play, but more as like they're just trying to grow the revenue from their exchange platform and not from their actual app.
Yeah, like their long-term plays with brokers. I see it both ways. I also think that it has to do with the user type you're talking about. So I think there's like one user that's a high trading individual that's going to maybe even try to make an income stream from Kalshi. And that person's always going to have the Kalshi app downloaded. Mm-hmm. And then there's more of like a us type of individual that like a couple times a year is willing to make a bet and probably will do that through Robinhood. And I'm not sure like where Kalshi is in the end going to make most of their money from. There was a market watch report that came out saying that the brokers / exchanges, like both like Robinhood, Kalshi, they didn't make that much money off of the election contracts, even though a lot of bets were placed.
So with Kalshi's trading fees being published and some analysis done, just to sum it up, it seems that the average money that Kalshi makes is 0.8% on every dollar traded. And so they saw $700 million traded on their elections platform. And I think there was something about they didn't make money on Kamala v. Trump because they weren't going to charge on the presidential race or something. I don't exactly remember the details. But essentially, like, they saw $700 million of volume of the total of all of their events contract. And then in Robinhood's case, they also saw around 200 million. And so when you walk that back, it's basically around $2 million that you can make from these events contracts. And Robinhood just booked like over 600 million in their last quarter alone.
Well,
so
that's also like in the bull case. Because if we look today,
Yeah.
it's Sunday, right before the Super Bowl. And I checked Kalshi before we started recording this episode, and they were at $6.2 million traded total,
Yeah.
which is literally nothing.
there's not enough money in these markets to make enough of a revenue stream to justify their valuation right now.
Well, I don't think it's true that there's not enough money in the market. Like within sports betting, there definitely is enough money to be made.
Like in events contracts, in the context of Kalshi right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
yeah.
And I think like, let's say it's 6 million right now. Let's say with Robinhood, that would have been at least doubled. We'll say, and like, sure, maybe you're getting up to 12 million. I think DraftKings last year saw $52 million traded on their platform.
But the other thing is DraftKings charges a lot more than Kalshi does.
They made like $8 million off of that 52 million.
Yeah, so they charge 7 to 10 cents per dollar of wagered on sports betting. So that's 7 to 10% markup. That's a 10x on whatever call she's making. So it's just like not a straight comparison. Like, yes, there's this market in sports betting, but the way that Kalshi has structured their fees, they're just not charging enough. And if you take this now back to like Robinhood, and does it make sense for them to build out an events contracts exchange themselves or build out that platform? I just don't think the revenue is there. I don't think the volume is there. The other thing I was going to say is that Kalshi can't spend any money on CAC costs. Their LTV per customer is just a lot lower, just intuitively, when you're putting all your stocks on Robinhood's platform, right? That's like a good chunk of your like total net worth, right?
Yeah.
And what they say is like good financial practices is to like put a lot of your money in like the S&P, right?
Yeah.
Because like you like meet the market and dollar cost average it, right? And so if the normal person is using Robinhood as their first brokerage and they're putting like a lot of their net worth into there, Robinhood has like a way higher LTV. So they can also spend money on CAC costs. Kalshi just can't do this. And so I just think that their broker app is purely just a way to make regulation headway and to like make events contracts front and center for the CFTC. I don't think it's the way they make money at all.
Yeah, I could see that. I think where I end up disagreeing is this is all under the realm of partnerships, but then it ends up being like a build versus buy conversation because I think all three of us think the most probable scenario is this isn't a long-term partnership. And it either leads to an acquisition or Robinhood builds it out themselves. And I think that once the CFTC gives regulatory clarity from like an engineering and product perspective, it's not that difficult to build out. And Robinhood could easily just have a team work on 0 to 1, like ripping off Kalshi, unless they have some type of an exclusivity agreement that they've signed, but I highly doubt it.
I guess they've never been the exchange though. So they don't even have the like engineering muscle to build the exchange.
Oh, like you're saying like they have to build out an events contracting.
Yeah, like basically like Robinhood would have to build out an events-based contract exchange from scratch. I feel like the market making aspect of it is like less challenging because they could probably just get that like
they have to partner with someone.
Yeah, they can just partner with someone, which is what they already do. Yeah. On the brokerage front, they're like great at doing that.
Yeah. I think the conversation is more like, will Robinhood try to acquire Kalshi just for the exclusivity in events contract, or will Robinhood not care and let other brokers start working with Kalshi and like let E-Trade do it and stuff like that? I think because events contract is so new, fun, and so forward looking, and Robinhood generally likes to like poise themselves as like the very modern broker, they will want to maintain that exclusivity to a certain extent. It's basically just like, what is Kalshi's willingness? Do they think that they actually can become a full-fledged exchange with all these other brokers? And I think their bet right now is yes. I think over time, though, I don't see brokers moving to this model wanting to work with them. And so
because they're like so legacy.
Exactly. So then the only way Kalshi stays alive is like a Robinhood acquires them for some like lower valuation than what they've already raised. But that's just my hypothesis.
I was just going to say, I think that with more guidance from the CFTC, like we'll know what the actual market size of the events contract market becomes.
Yeah.
And I think once Robinhood can better gauge what that is, it either like does make sense to just like, fully dive into that,
Yeah.
or it makes sense to take a more
Partnership.
like a less risky approach,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. There is an argument, like if you draw parallels, like what you were saying to sports betting and the size of the sports betting market, which is right now what
13 billion in gross revenue in sports betting across everything in 2024, which is insane.
Yeah. And so there's a market there for sports betting, right? And if you can say, okay, there in sports betting, it can be everywhere because sports betting is like a version of events contract. It's just like, will Kalshi be able to get there fast enough to stay alive? And if you look at their most recent valuation in 2022, they raised total over the time that they've been alive, they raised around $100 million. Their last valuation was at 780. They have 200 employees. I have to believe that like over time they've burned through a lot of their cash. So they either have like a secret round that they haven't announced, they have a down round that they haven't announced, or they are literally close to needing more cash.
Well, they have, like, I know they've tweeted before about different investors just giving them
Money,
cash,
yeah.
to cover
the
Whatever they-
election and
yeah.
stuff. But I don't know, like, what the terms of that was. If that was, like, an equity investment or,
Yeah.
like, a loan. Because it could have just been, like, a loan.
Yeah.
And then also when they raised though at the $780 million valuation, like fintech multiples were up because that was back in 2022. So I'm just like so curious like how Kalshi stays alive. I actually just think like a big question for me is like how do they stay alive over the next 3 years given the amount of cash that they've said they have right now?
I actually do think a lot of it lands on if sports betting is considered gaming or if it's like legalized by the CFTC under Kalshi, because like the NFL has come out and said that they're like against it being legalized.
Yeah.
There's been a ton of other people saying this is like a backdoor way of legalizing sports betting, even though sports betting isn't legal.
Yeah.
And I mean, come on, that's common sense. Like,
Yeah,
how is
yeah.
anyone going to say that that's not true?
So like Vlad really wants sports betting on the Robinhood app. Like he's alluded to this. He's alluded to acquisitions before. Like he wants to compete with the DraftKings of the world, and Kalshi gives him this
of
access.
course.
So I guess what I don't understand is like it could have been possible that Kalshi believes that they can do sports betting and they don't want to give Robinhood access to this, and they shouldn't have entered the partnership.
I also think that doing the partnership and introducing brokers gives them a lot of legitimacy. And at
Yeah,
this point, they
that's
are
fair.
playing a perception game. And honestly, for the last like 7 years, they've been playing a perception game where everything's in the hands of the CFTC, which is a really risky business model because they basically don't benefit from any of their network effects, any of their marketing, literally anything if like the regulation just doesn't come down on their side. But to Priya's point earlier, I feel like we can go a little bit into sports betting.
Sports is a very male dominated industry and like male watched industry, and then they also tend to be more risky with their money, so it all just like makes sense.
It's also just like a source of entertainment. Like people are not really entertained by the news or the Fed rate, and the amount of people that even watch what the Fed rate is probably like so small. But like everyone watches football.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
ingrained into like American culture for sure.
Yeah, it said that last year the American Gaming Association found that it was $120 billion legally that was spent on sports betting, but illegally people say it's like $1 trillion plus.
That's
You're
insane.
lying. That's crazy.
And so like
How's
the
that even
market-
possible?
Well, because there's so much betting that's illegal.
Yeah, I
and
guess,
it's just
like,
like
at a
money. It's just like
bar,
money
yeah.
being exchanged too.
Yeah,
Because it's
yeah.
like if you
Like
win,
we had a
you bet.
sports, like we had a Super Bowl market with ourselves.
Yeah,
And, like,
and you
if you
probably
look
just
at-
Venmo'd each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and then people like Drake are putting down like $5 million
Drake's
bets.
are insane.
Yeah, like he
Wait.
posts all his bets.
Drake's bets are crazy.
Wait, what are they?
No, like it's just like which team he thinks will win, but he'll put like $2 million on the line.
And he'll like put it on his Instagram, or even like Portnoy.
You know
Yeah.
what's crazy is it's almost like Pelosi's like trades being published, except in this case, a celebrity like betting something doesn't have any extra access to information than like a normal person does. Maybe they do have on some like injury, but it's like really just about the performance of the players at the end of the day. Versus like in the actual markets, it's like you have insider trading knowledge.
Yeah.
Which I just think is funny. But yeah.
Isn't Drake pretty good?
Yeah, he like always wins, and then he like doubles his money, so he just like makes like $10 million just for fun.
Maybe I should follow the Drake.
We should
tracker
see
now.
who he wants to win the Super Bowl.
It's worth mentioning that whether or not so there's sports betting, which is like what DraftKings does.
Yeah.
And then Kalshi says they're doing sports trading, but it's like functionally the same thing.
Yeah.
But then there's like obviously huge controversy around if sports betting should be legal. As of right now, it's legal in 39 states across the country, but it's unclear what will happen in the future. And the whole debate around it is like, there's like benefits to the money that gets made and the jobs that get created and the viewership it brings to the sport. But obviously there's the opportunity for integrity issues.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on for another 20 minutes on this whole topic.
I'm good.
I mean, I see I see the pros of it. I guess it's very similar to bringing regulation to crypto in a way. Just like all the shady activity happening, you either get rid of it by like legalizing it, or you like bring it to the United States and bring all that money to the United States too. Because like right now, all of these crypto firms are operating offshore.
Yeah.
And so like the US sees like no benefits, and it's just allowing shady shit to happen.
This is like the marijuana argument and why they legalized marijuana, or they're starting to legalize it in different states.
Yeah.
Well, I think like weed, crypto, events contract, and sports betting all ask the question of if legalizing something is objectively going to decrease the quality of life of the people participating in it on average.
Yeah.
Does the government have a responsibility to step in, or is that on the individual?
Yeah.
And I feel like I tend to think it's on the individual, but I do see how it's tough.
Yeah, I also understand why the CFTC sometimes takes time to come to these decisions, because it's like you're not going to know what's the right answer without some like initial market research of the illegal activity to see what's happening and the effects of it.
It's also like the way that you want to regulate Bitcoin now that it's become mainstream is different than the way that you might have wanted to regulate it 15 years ago. And I think that's okay. Bitcoin right now is like generally thought of as a commodity, right? But like the whole debate was, is it a security or is it a commodity? And a security is like something that's like more volatile.
Yeah.
And I think that as it's stabilized, I think it's not really a form of currency fully in our society today, but it's more of one than it was like 15 years ago. Whenever like we came up with the definition of commodity and security, we didn't have crypto. So it's like,
like I can see Thomas, or what was it? George Washington at the table being like, oh,
Thomas Jefferson,
George Washington being like, what will crypto do? Okay, anyways. Awesome. That wraps up our story on Robinhood Kalshi. So now moving on to our Stargate story. Stargate is a $500 billion plan or initiative backed by OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle. Stargate is projected to create over 100,000 jobs and enhance AI capabilities, also to position the United States as the AI superpower, specifically above China.
Trump was the one that announced this the day after his inauguration, and it seems like he's trying to take credit for this. Stargate actually started a long time ago. The initial conversation started in like 2022, and they were initially between OpenAI and Microsoft.
Yeah.
And so since then, like conversations have evolved, whatever. Microsoft got cut out of this deal.
Well, it makes
not completely,
but it makes sense because it's like OpenAI is like, oh, we're running out of like data centers to run our models because our engineers are inefficient. JK.
Dude, Microsoft is like a guy that like asks you to be exclusive because he's jealous, and then you ask for like too much and they're like, actually, like you could see other people.
And
cool.
like now with OpenAI's latest round that they're about to close, SoftBank is going to become the largest individual investor, taking over Microsoft's position in OpenAI. And I was like, damn, that sucks.
The whole characterization of Stargate is fascinating because it's a new company, but no one's referring to it as a company. They're referring to it as an initiative.
Because like OpenAI owns 40%, SoftBank owns 40%, and then the rest of the 20% is divvied between other players.
Yeah. It's also interesting because all the comparisons that are being made are like to the Manhattan Project or to like public infrastructure projects like the highways it's being compared to.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, it's not.
It is a private company. Classic Trump trying to take credit.
I feel like Trump thinks about this as a trade deal where he signed a bunch of pro-AI executive orders and in turn wants this announcement to be made from the White House. Honestly, the first time I watched it, it was in passing and I kind of assumed that like there was US government money going into
me
this.
too.
I also did.
Which is, I'm sure if we're assuming that and we're reporting on this, that like a lot of people are assuming that, and he just like took credit. And like, have you seen the clip where Masa Song like a while ago before Trump was even in office is like, it'll be $100 billion investment, and Trump is like, what about 200 billion? Just kidding. Well,
it makes sense that it was 100 billion initially because that's the money that they've already put up, and then he's just essentially increased that cap to 500 by making this announcement. 500.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably like a lot of people that had an incentive. Key owners of the company also benefit by making it sound bigger.
Yeah. He's also like completely undermining like any work that Biden did. Not that Biden was like super pro AI and like doing all of these great things for the country, but he did pass like 2 executive orders this. And Trump is basically like, I'm overturning this. I'm putting in my own thing.
I feel like both Trump's executive orders and Biden's executive orders are like kind of vague in terms of the amount of information there is online.
I agree.
And all I could gather out of Biden's is like, it wasn't anti-AI. It was just like pro thinking about workers in the context of AI, which to me is like common sense. And Trump's wasn't like anti-workers at all. It was just like pro-AI. So it's not super clear precisely where they disagree.
The gist of like Biden's was that he wanted increased regulation.
Yeah.
And so like big tech was super against this because they were like, we want to be able to build and innovate as fast as possible. And so when Trump came in, he took away those limitations. So those things being like having an ethics board within the government, running like models through the government before releasing them. I go back and forth because I do think that having an ethical board or some sort of like oversight board that isn't the companies themselves is beneficial. So Trump just completely took that away.
But the government is also a business at the end of the day. Trusting a private corporation versus trusting the government is like not that much different in my opinion, because obviously in a private company, it's like the top individuals who like gained that power and worked for that power, versus in the government, it's like the top individuals who were like elected into those positions. And there's like still a difference in that.
Yeah.
I don't agree that the government is a company, but I see what you're saying, that at the end of the day, you're just trusting like a few people to make these large decisions.
Yeah.
I think it's about checks and balances. Like no one's saying like the government should be the one to implement this instead of the private corporation.
Yeah.
They're saying like the private corporation only has incentives to benefit themselves. The government also has incentives to benefit themselves, but they also have incentives to benefit the people because that's who votes for them, which is why they're not a company, which is why they can act as a check on the private corporation.
But I do think private corporations do have, if they're big enough, they do have incentive to benefit like their overall people, because no one wants mass destruction. I think there's enough people within a private corporation that will not do bad things.
But we've literally seen what happened at OpenAI. Everyone has left over like safety and ethics concerns. And now with a government oversight board or something like that, that doesn't mean that it's like necessarily the elected individuals that are the ones doing this. Like
Agreed,
it could
yeah.
be like people from all of these different tech companies nominating one person to this board.
By your logic, wouldn't ExxonMobil take basic steps to prevent like an oil spill?
It's like
Environment for
Facebook
people.
too.
Yeah, it's like Facebook. Like they just don't care.
I think like government in the same way, even though it has checks and balances within its organization, like those checks and balances don't always work and don't always pan out. For example, the DOD failing their audit all the time, right? There's like no balance to that part of the government. And so what I'm trying to say is that sure, it is like marginally better that like the government has some AI regulation to make sure that it checks these private companies, but like the process of putting those people into the government to regulate these AI companies isn't well done. And I don't know if we have reason to believe that it will be well done, just because like the smartest individuals of the world don't want to work for the government because they just don't get enough benefits out of it.
But
I
that's
don't-
different than having an ethics board. Like
I
those
also
are
think
completely
the
different things.
DOD example isn't a good example, because like the reason why the DOD fails their audits is because private corporations have too much influence. That's an example of why you'd want to get like lobbying money out of the government. If you think about ethics as like rights of workers, the environment, and like in other categories, other things, the government definitely cares more. Like OpenAI definitely cares less about like the people that are going to be displaced by AI than the government does, whether that's because of like the way people will vote or because of like the goodness in their hearts. Obviously they do.
Like they care more about us than big tech. So yeah, back to Stargate and all of its environmental impacts. We know data centers are bad and they're putting out a ton of carbon emissions.
Yeah, and specifically with data centers for AI, they use more power. An average rack at a data center will use 30 kilowatts, and now they can use up to like 80 kilowatts. Then the data center gets too hot, and so then there's also water impact, being more wasteful of water than we originally were, which is directly affecting the environment. To kind of back up, the initial investment of $100 billion will go into 20 factories, and these 20 factories are estimated to produce 36 million additional tons of CO2, which represents basically a 1% increase on the US annual CO2 emissions.
Hey, but don't forget about the credits to offset them.
Yeah, I was thinking like, okay, how much does a 1% increase actually matter in terms of total CO2 emissions? And basically, because of COVID, like the rate of change has been quite all over the place. In 2019 to 2022, we went down 10% just because people weren't driving cars and like moving around and stuff, and then went back up 7%. But essentially in 2022 to 2023, we went down 3%. In 2024 to 2025, the numbers haven't really been put out there.
Well, it'll probably be really bad, right? Because of AI.
Yeah, basically moving the number of CO2 emissions is really, really hard. And so single digit percentage
high.
It matters. And so like this initiative of building these data centers obviously are going to add CO2 emissions. Regardless of Stargate, there is just in general more development of data centers across the world. And so this is just an increasingly bigger part of the pie of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, there are like techniques being taken though, like using rainwater and like renewable sources of energy. There's so many things that people are trying to do. I don't think we're really there yet.
And it gets back to the regulation conversation of like, you can be pro data centers, but you can also regulate how these data centers are built, like by requiring like it to meet like a certain energy level bar, which I think they have right now, but you could also up that bar too from the federal government to then increase incentive of people investing in environmental friendly technology.
Yeah.
What's even crazier is that they originally were going to use a specific vendor to build these data centers called Crusoe. And Crusoe has this technology where they use oil and gas to power these data centers, but the way they do it essentially leads to 70% of savings on CO2 emissions. So this technology reduces the CO2 emissions in a normal data center. And to be really clear in the public statements, it just says that Oracle is going to lease this facility from Crusoe, but it's actually not explicit on how much the build has been finished and whether like Crusoe or Oracle are going to continue what they have planned or if that's going to change the environmental impact of these data centers. But I feel like I have reason to believe that Oracle might not finish it in the way Crusoe is planned, and maybe that has impact.
And that's where like I'm saying I'm pro building the data centers, but I would do it in the sustainable way.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we can just use the argument of like, oh, we're going to fall behind China for everything.
To
Like,
be
that's
fair to
always
Oracle,
right there.
yeah, to be fair to Oracle, they do use 86% renewable energy across their data centers. And the target is 100% by 2025, which like if you look at like some of the other big tech companies, their timelines are way pushed out from what Oracle's timeline is. Oracle isn't like completely not thinking about this.
Yeah, so we don't know. So I guess to your point then, like we don't know if Oracle's technology is better than Crusoe's and if that switch was really reflective of the administration or not, or like the care about environmental impact or not.
Yeah, Oracle's specifically been focused on their cloud infrastructure data centers.
Yeah.
And over the last few years has been switching to like all renewable energy sources.
It's also ironic that the Stargate announcement all comes out and then DeepSeek becomes a really big deal right after, because DeepSeek basically showed that China is able to create models much more efficiently than we are. The 6 million was an underestimate, but the architecture itself is more efficient. And so it kind of puts Stargate in a bad light.
I do agree that their architecture is impressive that they've used, but like it's pretty widely known that they use ChatGPT to train their models. And I think although we don't know that for a fact, everyone agrees on it because literally when you ask it who it is, it'll say, I'm ChatGPT. And as soon as that was discovered, they literally cut it out like so quick, like the next like hour after it was like surfacing all over Twitter, like it no longer replied that anymore. But I do think that part of why DeepSeek was able to get to where they are with such limited compute outside of the architecture is because they already had this precedent set by OpenAI and were able to take advantage of their models to develop their own models.
GPT could walk so DeepSeek could run. Like that.
It was like GPT could walk so DeepSeek could walk also. Like I don't even think it was that much better.
But there is something to be said that like they do, like in a constrained environment of resources, you will try to innovate and you will not try to be as wasteful. And I think like, especially in like a highway example, right? You add more lanes, you just add congestion, right? You build public infrastructure like subway cars, buses that like can actually transport people to different places. You actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so like what I just challenge OpenAI and just any data center initiative in general is like, we definitely need more data center capacity, but are we being as efficient as possible?
I would argue that we're still in the research development phase of AI. And one approach in research is to spend first and optimize later.
Yeah.
With the idea being like, let's spend as much as we can, get to the solution. And this is especially true in hardcore science fields like physics, biotech, AI, things like that. And then we can always figure out how to optimize it later. And I would say that's probably the approach that the United States has taken so far.
The solutions that Stargate is targeting are things like curing cancer, which are fields that have historically been all research and development capex.
I think it just distills down to the final question of like, when do we actually prioritize climate change? And like, when do we say that climate change is the existential threat to our existence as a society? We won't be able to get to do anything if we're not around anymore. AI research could be the thing that like, you know, we build some crazy super AI model and then it solves climate change for us. Who the fuck knows, right? You have to break the curve. and like we haven't
Yeah.
broken it.
Humans are also psychologically bad at understanding impacts that are too big and accurately pricing them in. Like, yes, I'm worried about climate change and I'm someone that fully believes in it, and I still don't really think about it day to day. There are different situations that could lead to literally civilization being extinct, and everyone's kind of just like, it'll probably not happen, or like the market will correct in time. And with climate change, like the market is not correcting in time.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe like a more intelligent species will come out, like be created after we die as like a species, and that species will be better at prioritizing long-term gains and like pricing that in.
Or Elon can colonize Mars.
We're back to the alien conversation. I do think though that like AI will be one of the primary economic drivers in our world. Whoever can achieve AGI first will have such an advantage over any other country. Like, I don't think that like we can even comprehend what that means. And so I think that like in the meantime, it is important to make sure like we're building towards that.
There's just absolutely no chance that we don't get to AGI first. I just don't even think it's a risk. No, see, like there's no way.
It's great to be a US-born citizen.
Hopefully.
Cool. That wraps up our story on Stargate. We're going to move on to my favorite segment of the pod, which is also our only current segment of the pod. Companies that won't get our check. And today on the docket, we have Partiful. Partiful is the app that allows you to send out events to your friends and then they can RSVP. It's basically like Evite, but Gen Z. And Apple just released its own version of it as well.
They have some competition
So
now.
well, Partiful has always had competition. They've just been blowing it out of the water. And so, yeah, Anika, Priya, would you invest in Partiful?
Personally, no. I think Partiful is great. I'm an active consumer of the product itself.
Yeah.
I think especially when it comes to like how they're making money, when I looked up different ways that they monetize, one of the two was merch, and that was all I needed to know to know they wouldn't get my check.
Their monetization strategy is as good as our like monetization strategy in 6 months, with sneak peek that our merch is dropping in 6 months.
Wait, it's so crazy. In January 2023, the company tweets, like literally Partiful tweets, Partiful will not make money and investors gave us money to help you party, and that is what we're here to do.
They don't care. Like
They generally don't care.
Their tweets are insane. They also tweeted a screenshot of Apple's copyright rules in response to them creating, because like Apple has something that it's like developers shouldn't copy, basically.
Yeah, it's like literally called copycat.
Yeah. So they raised $20 million in a Series A round, and it's like, what are these investors thinking? But
But like their investors are, it's like
I don't
Benchmark,
think it's like, what are
GV, like
these investors
Andreessen.
thinking?
yeah,
Like,
so literally I was going to say, there's an investment thesis here, and like I understand it. Personally, I wouldn't do it, but like I can see it. The global event management software market is around $6.7 billion today, and it's supposed to grow at a 15% rate. So if you believe in that industry in general and a path to a monetization strategy, you believe Partiful will figure it out.
and a path to like, I feel like buying tickets.
Yeah.
Right now, the tickets people are buying in Partiful are probably like, hey, I rented out a bar for my birthday and I'm charging everyone $50.
Yeah.
But that can obviously be taken way further to like buying concert tickets or like other types of tickets that end up being a way bigger market size.
Well, Eventbrite is a leader in the space, and they have $300 million in revenue in the last year. So they're a profitable, I'm pretty sure they're a profitable company. They're a publicly traded company. I just think it's like a cyclical nature. Like we had Evite at one point, then we had Facebook events, now we have Partiful. And it's like, you just don't have a technical moat really to like warrant the longevity of your business. Your moat is like how cool your platform is, right?
Yeah.
Like how trendy
How
your
hype
platform
it
is.
is.
Like in the same way, it's like social media kind of, but then at least social media has like insane. There's
Well,
like
I think there is actually a technical moat in social media, because I think like TikTok has some amount of algorithm related moat.
Yeah.
But I do think you could compare it to like a Flow. That's a good example where Apple also completely copied their product, but
Yeah.
Flow is still doing really well, and Flow doesn't really have a technical moat in my eyes.
I agree. It just personally.
You're like, I wouldn't invest in Flow either.
Just like the
But
stacks
but
are.
like I understand.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I understand the business, and like I understand how someone could make money from the business too. It's just like I wouldn't choose to invest in it long term.
Yeah. What is the first thing you're probably going to invest in today? Maybe like AI,
Yeah.
AI companies, right? And so I'm sure all these investors have a good amount of money in AI companies. So what's like a $2 million check in an event management software company that's like held by
Diversification.
yeah, it's just diversification, which makes sense.
There's also value in branding. It just launched, but Apple's version of this app, first of all, the app icon is so ugly. So I just want to say that pissed me off. It only has 4 stars on the App Store. Partiful has 5 stars and 50,000 reviews, which is honestly pretty impressive. And then some of Apple's features that go beyond what Partiful offers, like AI image generation, are terrifying.
I mean, I think it doesn't matter though. Like my take is like, it doesn't matter what it is because it integrates so well into like the Apple ecosystem that already exists. Like literally just the fact that you can create a shared album for an event, that itself would get me to use it.
Apple ecosystem, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is the other argument. And I feel like for Apple, this is just a play to direct people to like Apple Apps, Apple Calendar.
Yeah.
And you need an iCloud Plus subscription of 99 cents a month to even use this. So that clearly shows that it's like an ecosystem play, which is like common sense, but worth mentioning.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that wraps up our episode. This was a fun time, guys. I liked the topics
We had some
here.
technical difficulties, but we made it through.
Wait, before we wrap up the episode, we have to include that me and Priya were in SF's top 1% of party hosts. And my takeaway from that was not anything about myself, but just that the city is lame as fuck.
Wait, that's actually insane because like we don't even host.
We don't even party. Like literally, if you take a typical Friday night, like last night, I was sitting at home researching for the podcast. Like I don't have a life. Why am I in the top 1%?
Yeah, the
of
SF
party
stats were honestly really shocking to me.
But I will say it was fun to get my year wrapped in Partiful, and that's like the type of thing Apple events probably won't do because they don't care enough. Like maybe, but probably not.
Maybe.
So I see a slight note.
Well, that wraps up our episode. Thanks for joining us today. This was a real fun one. But we want to watch the Super Bowl now. So bye.
We barely made it.
We barely did. Bye.